Welcome back, and in this video we're going to be talking about functions. I love functions. Everybody loves functions. Gotta use functions. Let's go ahead and get started by opening up a playground, make a blank one, and let's call it functions rule, because they definitely do. Okay, so what is a function? Well, at this point you are definitely getting familiar with executing a bunch of logic, and you're probably starting to put together some examples of things that you could do with your code. Let's go ahead and start with one cool thing that I guess we could do in code. In this example, we're going to be calculating gas mileage of cars. This is obviously a pretty simple calculation, but let's go ahead and see what it looks like to do it in code. So to calculate the gas mileage, sometimes as programmers we need to map out exactly what it is that we're trying to do mathematically speaking. Like, what does it look like to actually calculate the gas mileage? Well, we need to divide the number of miles traveled by the gallons of gas used. Or if you're not an American, then you'd be using liters of gas used, but for some reason we got to be all different, so we decided to use gallons. Don't ask me why. Anyways, so we're going to divide the number of miles traveled by the gallons of gas used. So how would we do that? So let's say that we wanted to create a variable and we wanted to say Prius gas mileage. And let's say that we had the number of miles that the Prius drove and we had the gallons of gas that it used. Well, what would we do? Let's actually, real quick, before we do this, let's store those in a couple of variables. Let's say var Prius miles traveled equals, let's say it traveled 100 miles. And let's say var Prius gallons used equaled, let's say 2.5. Okay, so here's something really important to point out. When we're calculating gas mileage, it's pretty important that it has a decimal number, right? Like, we would want to know the difference between 25 and a half gallons, or sorry, 25 and a half miles per gallon and just 25 miles per gallon. That might be important. I mean, maybe it's not, but in this case, let's assume that it is. Let's assume that it's pretty important to know that. It's definitely important to know, fractionally speaking, how much or how many gallons of gas were used. Like 2.5 gallons of gas is a lot different than 2 gallons of gas, especially when calculating gas mileage. So as a whole, for this example, what data type are we going to be using? We're going to be using doubles. We're not going to be using ints because, again, ints are whole numbers. So the number of miles traveled right here, if you'll recall, this is an inferred integer. I just want to keep going over that. I want to keep drilling this in. So this is an inferred integer. And why is it inferred? Do you remember? The reason it's inferred is because we didn't explicitly tell it that it was an integer, but it's assuming that it's an integer because it's a whole number and we didn't put any decimals on it. So right now this is an inferred integer. And this, is an inferred double. Cool. Enough about that. That should start to be click with you by now. If not, we're just going to keep doing it and it'll just keep getting better and better. So we've got an integer and a double, and if you'll recall from the first video, we cannot actually divide these things by each other. It's going to complain. So if we say var Prius gas mileage, and we set that equal to Prius miles traveled divided by Prius gallons used, it's going to tell us that we're not allowed to do that because one is of type int and the other is of type double. So let's think for a second here. What would make more sense? Would it make more sense to cast the miles traveled to a double, or would it make more sense to cast the gallons used to an int? And if we kind of remember what that means, what does it mean to cast something? Well, we could represent 100 as a double value, right? Like, we could put 0.0, and this would solve the problem because it would be an inferred double and an inferred double, and there's no problem dividing doubles by doubles. So that's one way to do it. Or if we wanted this to definitely be an integer because we only counted our miles as integers for some reason, what would make more sense, to cast it as a double or to cast the gallons used as an integer? Kind of think about that for a second if you can recall the first video. the thing that we're going to want to do is cast the miles traveled to a double, because that will give us more overall precision. If we decide to cast gallons used to an integer, then we're effectively going to be dividing 100 by 2, because remember, 2.5 casted to an int would be 2, because it's got to be a whole number and it just rounds down. So 100 divided by 2 is very different than 100 divided by 2.5. So we want to make sure that we're casting miles traveled to a double. So let's go ahead and do that. If we put double and we surround this in parentheses, we've now casted this to a double, and we're completely allowed to do that. So this is correct. If you traveled 100 miles and you used 2.5 gallons, that would be 40 miles per gallon. This is absolutely correct. So let's say that we wanted to do this again. We had, Ford Raptor miles traveled, and we set that equal to 120, and we said Ford Raptor gallons used, and we set that equal to, how much would it use? I don't know. I'm going to say it used 8 gallons, probably uses a lot of gas. Then we would have to say var Ford Raptor gas mileage equals, and we'd have to do this again, double Ford Raptor miles traveled divided by Ford Raptor gallons used. Okay, man, you can start to see this is getting exhausting. Okay, here's a good thing. So I just messed up right here. This is important. I actually don't want to edit this out of the video. I want you to see this because this is something that programmers do all the time. Real quick, if you're sitting in front of the same screen right now, I want you to stop. This is a good learning opportunity. What did we do wrong? Why is this complaining right now? What is the error? It says that we cannot divide a double by an int. How did this happen? Because this didn't happen last time. Well, take a second, pause the video, try to figure it out, and then come back. So the reason that we're having this problem is because what data type is this right here? This is actually an inferred integer. And that's because on this one, I put 2.5, but on this one, I just put 8. So the compiler is going to assume that you want this to be an integer because it didn't provide it with a decimal number. So there's 2 ways to solve this. One is we could put 8.0, and that would fix this problem. Oops. So that'll fix this problem. If we give it a second to think, it's good to go. That's one way to do it. Now let's say I'm just stubborn and I just really want to put 8 there. Well, we can explicitly tell it that it's a double, and that would also solve the problem. That way we don't have to provide a decimal number. Now it's just going to assume that this is 8.0 because we told it that it's a double. So anyways, now if we run this, the Ford Raptor gets 15 miles per gallon. So that's cool. Now, here's the problem. Let's say that I gave you 100 cars in your code that you needed to calculate the gas mileage for. This is going to get exhausting, having to keep putting these here and then keep calculating it, keep writing the same equation over and over again. That's where functions come in. So here at the top of the thing, let's go ahead and create our first function. So in Swift, to define a function, we use the func keyword, F-U-N-C, short for function. Now we're going to name the function. Let's call this display gas mileage. And we're going to put some parentheses here. And inside of the parentheses, we're going to define what are called parameters. Let's go ahead and write them, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. So 1, we're going to want to know the miles traveled, or let's just put miles. Miles is going to be of type integer. And let's put gallons. And gallons is going to be of type double. Okay? And then let's put some curly braces here. Okay, let's go ahead and break down everything going on here. So we've got func. Func just means function. We're just telling the file, hey, we want to create a function. And we want to call that function display gas mileage. So anytime that I want to call this function, I'm going to call it by this name right here. Now, here's where things get a little bit interesting. So here's the parameter. This is the first parameter. I know that as a new programmer, this can sometimes be a little bit hard to grasp what's going on, but as we write a couple of these and use them, I think they'll start to make sense. So miles, this is the first parameter. So in order to display the gas mileage, we do need to know two things. We need to know the number of miles and we need to know the number of gallons. So let's just assume for a second that we have the miles and we have the gallons, whatever those values are. So what we're going to do is we're going to say let. This is also a new word here. This might be a little bit new. You've seen let a couple times, but let's just go ahead and confirm real quick what this is. Let is a constant. It is the same thing as a variable. The only difference is that with a constant, with let, this means you will never change it. You can never change this value. Var means that you're going to change the value later on. Let just means it'll never change. This is a value, for this example, that we never want to change. So I'm going to put let. So let gas mileage equal double miles divided by gallons. Okay, so now we've got like a much more generic version of what we were doing down here. Down here it was very specific. It was the Prius miles traveled and the Prius gallons used and the Prius gas mileage that we calculated. Here this is more generic. We don't really know what kind of car this is. It's just some random car, and we're going to give it some miles and some gallons used, and it's going to calculate the gas mileage of that car. And then below that, let's go ahead and just print the gas mileage. Okay, cool. So now we can actually just get rid of all of this code here now that we have a function. So let's come down here and let's call display gas mileage. You just press enter and it'll autofill. And we're going to pass in 100 and we're going to pass in 2.5. And this would be the Prius gas mileage right here. Right? Kind of like we did down here. Okay, and then we're going to display gas mileage for the Raptor, and the Raptor went 120 miles and it used 8 gallons, and we can put a comment and put Raptor gas mileage. And now we get to just delete all of that code. We don't need any of that anymore. See how much cleaner this looks? So now if I click run, we get 40.0 and 15.0, basically like we did before. This was the Prius gas mileage and this was the Raptor gas mileage. So again, let's go back over this one more time. Let's try to understand how this works. So we've got a function, and a function is basically just any logic that you're going to need to do lots of times in your code. And if we had a whole bunch of cars that we needed to just keep calculating gas mileage for, like, I don't know, if we had like a cars.com app or something, I don't know if they actually calculate gas mileage like this, but I'm sure they calculate a lot of things for a lot of different cars. And so they've got a lot of functions that can do logic for them over and over again, because the logic is essentially the same. Calculating gas mileage for a car is not different for the Raptor. It's not different for the Toyota. Like, it's all going to be the same. The mathematical equation is always the same. It's miles divided by gallons. So we just put that in a function, and now we just make it super easy to call. Just display gas mileage. We pass in the number of miles, which is an integer, as we've defined right here, the number of miles that it traveled, and the gallons that it used, and we can get that here. Let's take it up just one more little step. Maybe this will help you understand what's going on. So let's create one more parameter, and let's put it before the miles. Let's call it name, and let's make this a string. So now we have 3 parameters. We've got the name parameter, which is a string, a miles parameter, which is an integer, and a gallons parameter, which is a double. And we're just right now printing the gas mileage. But let's do a little bit of string interpolation. Again, we want to just keep using these concepts over and over again. So we will interpolate a string, and we will say the, and then we're going to put name gets, and then we're going to put gas mileage miles per gallon. Okay, so we're going to put the name of the car gets whatever the gas mileage is, miles per gallon. And so down here it's complaining because we actually added this new parameter, but down here we haven't put it in yet. So it's saying, like, it doesn't look like you have enough parameters for the function that you're calling, and it's correct. So let's put name, and we're going to put Prius. And then we're going to add to this one, we're going to put name Raptor. Now everything should stop complaining. And if we run this function, we really conveniently get the Prius gets 40 miles per gallon and the Raptor gets 15 miles per gallon. Pretty cool. So, I mean, now you could literally try this with your own car if you wanted to. You could just do whatever. You could do this all day long. Dodge Challenger. drove 300 miles and it used 15 gallons, let's say. The Dodge Challenger gets 20 miles per gallon. So you can just keep doing this over and over again. So you can start to see the value of using functions. They're very powerful, and we use them all the time because we don't want to just keep having to write that same logic over and over and over again. So let's recap. It's the end of the lesson here. Let's go ahead and recap. So we're creating a function. We're defining a set of parameters, name, which is a string, miles, which is an integer, and gallons, which is a double. And we're going to use these things over and over again. And to calculate the gas mileage, we're going to use the miles that we receive from the function that was called. We're going to get the gallons that was also passed in, and we're going to calculate the gas mileage. And then we're going to interpolate a string using the name that was passed into the function and the gas mileage that we calculated to display to the user what the gas mileage is. And again, we get this down here. The Prius gets 40 miles per gallon, Raptor gets 15 miles per gallon, and the Dodge Challenger gets 20 miles per gallon. That wraps it up for this lesson. We're going to pick up a little bit more on functions in the next one. See you there.